Joining us for more on tonight's topic is Keith Fitzgerald, professor of political science at New College of Florida, and he served as a Democrat in the Florida House. Christian Ziegler, state committeeman for the Republican Party of Sarasota, and Rita Ferrandino, the treasurer of the Sarasota County Democratic Party. Welcome to everyone. And Rita and Christian, I want to start with you and ask you both the same question. What worries you the most about your candidate going into the general election? Rita?
It has been so negative for so long. I'm worried that people are not going to come out to vote. I think people are getting tired of all of this negativity, and what I'm worried about is voter turnout.
What are you worried about in terms of Hillary Clinton?
In terms of Hillary Clinton, people have been very negative about her for a very long time, and I worry that there's going to be fatigue from voters who support her in going out to vote.
Christian, what worries you about Donald Trump and the general election?
I think it's the same. I mean, this has been a long process, right? People start to get exhausted at one point. Have we reached that point or not? I don't know. Maybe people take a break and then they come back when the general gets closer and people get excited. But, some of my other worries were, obviously we have Supreme Court picks coming up, and I know Mr. Trump just released his list of names, and I think conservatives are pretty happy about that. Whether we're going to be unified or not, and I think this past weekend we had a meeting, the Republican Party of Florida, and everyone seemed very unified and excited to get behind Mr. Trump. So I'm not worried about those issues. I think maybe the voter fatigue, I would somewhat agree with.
But you still have high-profile Republicans like the Bushes, Mitt Romney, and others who are not even going to go to Cleveland.
You do, but at the end of the day, those are elected officials, and this is why Trump's doing so well, is because he ran against those individuals and he ran against that system. That's politics as usual. These are people even like Mitt Romney. I mean, I like Mitt, but he lost last time. I don't know why he comes out and he's a big voice to be reckoned with. You look at Jeb Bush, he had a lot of money. He didn't do so well in this primary. Trump's ran against the system. That's what voters are ready for, and that's why I think he's going to be elected come November.
Keith, what are you seeing in terms of the polling that is out there right now on Secretary Clinton and Donald Trump and the ability of both of them to win here in Florida?
Well, first of all, they share in common that they have very high negatives, and it's very difficult for any candidate in any race to turn around high negatives. So once people have formed a negative impression about you, it's always hard to get them back, and that sets up, to be honest, for a pretty negative campaign, because it's easier to play off those negatives than build up a candidate and bring them back. So I think that in the state of Florida, a lot of it is going to come down to turnout, as it often does. Florida is always a very close race, so each side has to figure out how to get their people out.
When you drill down into the polling in some precincts or congressional districts where you say the Democrat or the Republican traditionally have done well, are you seeing something different this year?
Yes, there has been some polling around the state, and I think we see that Donald Trump has some problems with Hispanic voters that are going to be very difficult to turn around. So there were inroads made in some communities by Republicans in some races, state level races and so forth. He's fallen back behind in those groups, and that's going to be a real challenge for him. He has some problems with women. Hillary Clinton is not doing as well with some of the groups that she's depending on to mobilize who are not reliable voters, and I have particularly in mind young people. So she does great with African Americans, she does great with Hispanics, but Obama did very well by mobilizing young people. She's not so strong there, so she's going to have to shore that up.
Rita, are you concerned about Bernie Sanders' continued presence in this campaign harming Hillary?
Well, I think that this weekend is our big Democratic caucus weekend in Orlando, and I think you're going to see people starting to unify. I think a lot of Democrats are tired of all of this fighting. Not in Nevada, and there's other circumstances. I think Dr. Fitzgerald can probably talk a little bit about that if you'd like, but I think it's just time to unify. I think you're going to see more unification happening as we go forward.
Hillary has two problems. Number one, I think it's 38% of Bernie Sanders supporters have said that they would vote for Trump over Hillary. That's a big problem, and I think a lot of those are the young vote, as Mr. Fitzgerald discussed. And then her second problem is she really hasn't been fully vetted, because when you look at the Democratic primary, it has not been as contentious. There haven't been as many attacks on each other. And then you look at Trump, he's gone through the ringer with 16 candidates running. it was a very contentious primary, and everything's been aired out. So Hillary's about to get her turn,
Christian,
and I think you're going to see her numbers come down because of that.
You just can't say that Hillary Clinton has not been vetted by the
She hasn't.
US
She hasn't.
voters.
Bernie Sanders has given her a pass on her email. He's given her a pass on everything. The only thing he's talking about are paid speeches. But if she's got a long history of background, she has a lot of issues, and those have not been brought to light by anyone yet because Bernie Sanders has shied away from that.
And I completely disagree.
Do you think you say Donald Trump just went through a ring of fire?
He did. He absolutely did.
But he has been in the public sphere so long, and growing up in New York, he was part of the landscape when I was growing up. I know that only the surface has been scratched in terms of what his experience has been.
You had $100 million. You had $100 million that were allocated towards Donald Trump and through that PAC, and they just went after him on everything. And I don't think she's had that same attention.
Let's keep in mind that he was vetted before the Republican Party primary base electorate, and that's a very different electorate than a general electorate. And a lot of the things that he may have gotten a pass on in that stage are going to be much harder when he gets out on the bigger stage. So, for example, some of his foreign policy statements are going to be a real problem going forward, and he really hasn't been challenged. It's a different audience. So there's a whole different deal when you're running a national election. There's a whole different electorate, and I think that both sides are going to have some issues that they're going to have to struggle with.
Let me ask this question because I see it on social media. There are a lot of Democrats out there who are Bernie or bust. I mean, we see that every day, and there are a lot of Republicans out there who cannot or are still maintaining that in the end they cannot vote for Donald Trump. I don't know which one of you could answer this. Maybe Keith. I mean, how often does it happen that people wind up going into the voting booth, maybe voting for the down ballot races and taking a pass at the presidential candidates because it's evil A or evil B?
It is a rare event in American history when you have the fundamental bases of each party shifting so that each of the major party candidates has problems within their own base. Now, one thing with the Democrats, you wonder where they're going to go. So I would suspect a lot of those people are coming home. The problem would be coming back, but will they get out? The Republican Party, there's some real fundamental shifts going on. That happens from time to time in American history. But I'll tell you this, it's almost never the case that you're going to get people voting below the ballot and not up above. Usually if people don't like the presidential candidate and they're demobilized, they just don't show up.
Then let me ask all of you this. If that is the case, are we likely to default to the pattern, at least here in Florida, that we have seen in the last general couple of presidential elections, and therefore the battle is that 7% that doesn't define themselves as Republican or Democrat, and they're looking for who can best speak to their future?
That's always going to be the battle, right? The people in the middle. But I think when you look at Donald Trump, he's interesting. I've talked to a lot of members that are of labor unions. And he's going to pull a lot of labor union vote. I mean, you look at Hillary Clinton, she's out there saying that she's going to put Americans out of business. You had Donald Trump saying he's going to protect American jobs. He's also, while doing that, and this is like really interesting, while he's shoring up that support, he's also riling up the very far right base. And those people are going to make calls, they're going to knock on doors, and they're going to get people because they're motivated to vote in this election. So he's kind of playing the very far right, and also the middle, he's got a lot of core support there. And I think a lot of Democrats are going to flip over to Trump.
We have less than a minute left, but Rita, I want to give you the last word.
What was the question?
The question is whether or not we're just going to default into the fight for that 7% of voters.
I'm going to agree with Christian. I think that it's always going to be about that, undecided, independently minded folks. I was stuck on the fact that Christian was talking to labor union members.
Shocking, right?
I would have liked to have seen that.
One of my friends is going to love that.
One or two that you probably did, yeah.
I don't know if Trump is going to get the endorsement of the Teamsters or the West Central Labor Council.
You'd be shocked. You'd be shocked.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you all for coming in tonight, and we'll be back in just a moment.